What's up everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, we'll try to populate the contact list screen or the chat list screen, which is the landing page for any user after they sign up or log into the app. Before we move any further, I hope everyone is working on the very latest code. I released a small video around 2 days ago where I talked about the breaking changes that I've made. Basically, we have categorized the methods present inside the Firebase methods file. Please check out the video if you haven't already, and refer to the branch 12.5 of the Skype clone repository in case you aren't aware of the changes that I've made. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with a quick demo. At the moment, I don't have any contacts. So I'll search for myself, drop a message, then as I come back to the chat list screen, there we go, a new contact appears. In the console, this is my accounts document, and in here, a new collection called contacts has been made. If I click on it, it contains a document, and the document further contains my contact's user ID and the time it was added as a contact. And the same thing happens in the contacts document as well, which would contain my user ID. And that's how both the users will get to see a new contact. We'll start off by making some changes to previously written code. Currently, we have this current user ID, which keeps track of the current user's user ID. We won't need this anymore, as now we have a user provider which can provide any type of user details whenever and wherever we need it. If you haven't checked out the part 12 of this series, then I would definitely suggest you to check that out to see the working of the user provider in more detail. And if you're new to the whole provider package and the way it manages states, in that case, I would definitely suggest to watch just a little basic starter video on provider or try it out on your own at least once to get a firm grasp on its working. We don't need the initials variable as well. Then in the init state, we retrieve the user details and initialize the current user ID and the initials variable. We won't be doing that as well, so we'll remove that. In fact, if we look at it, we can simply convert the chat list screen into a stateless widget. So I'll remove this part, and chat list screen will now extend stateless widget. Now there are several errors which will be resolved as we keep going, so we don't really need to focus on any of that just yet. I would also like to organize everything a bit more. Right here, I'll create a folder called widgets, which will contain standalone widgets of chat list screen. For example, the user circle widget. I'll just take it out from here, create a new file called usercircle.dart and paste it over here. We are not required to pass any value as an argument anymore. Instead, I'll just create a new user provider inside the build method, then initialize it by writing provider.of context and specify the type. Then inside the text widget, we can simply write utils.getInitials userprovider.getUser.name. This is where you get to see the richness provider brings to your code and your app. And this is just the starting. I'll create a new file called new chat button and take the code for new chat button widget and paste it over here. Of course, don't forget to import them back to the chat list screen. I'll remove that from here as the user circle does not require any arguments. Moving on to the chat list container, currently we need to pass the current user ID to chat list container, but not anymore. I'll remove that variable from the function definition as well. And please remind me that why did we make the chat list container as a stateful widget? But I made so many mistakes back then. Chat list container does not have to be a stateful widget, so I'll convert it to stateless again. Moving on, we're gonna need a stream builder here to listen to our contact collection, then display it inside a list view. So we'll leave the list view, but I'll take out whatever it returns and create a new widget out of it. This custom tile will contain the details of a user's contact. I'll create a new file called contactview.dart, create a new stateless widget called contactview, and paste that in. Then import all the necessary files and we are good to go. Let's start defining a contact model. Just inside the models folder, I'll create a new file called contact.dart. We'll create a class, contact. Now let's think about the possible properties a contact might have. A contact will have its own user ID, username, and profile photo. Earlier you saw that contact collection only has a UID and an added on timing. Now, why didn't we put the contact's name and contact's profile photo as well? Well, imagine this. You add a contact called user2 in the contact list of user1 and vice versa. Now, in the future, let's say user2 changes their name to user222 or changes their profile picture, but the contact details which is stored in user1's contact list or user1's contact collection is still the same. It would be very difficult to update a contact's details. Therefore, instead of holding a contact's name and contact's profile picture, we should hold something which is permanent and unique. What comes to mind? Of course, the user ID. I'll write string UID, and just for additional advantage, we can also write timestamp added on. Then initialize them over here. After that, I'll create a method called toMap. As always, it accepts a contact object and converts it into a map. Then we'll define a named constructor from map, which maps out a contact object from a map variable. Next, I'll make the addToContacts function in the chat methods file. Oh, before doing any of that, I would like to make some small changes. So far, we only have 2 methods in this file, and the way we are accessing a collection is by writing firestore.collection, and then we pass the necessary collection. Now, this is a bit redundant, so we can make a single variable which keeps track of this collection reference. I'll come at the top and create a final variable of type collection reference, name it message collection, and set it to firestore.collection and pass the messages collection. I'll copy this, rename the variable to user collection, and this variable refers to the user's collection. Now we can replace firestore.collection statement with a single statement called message collection. And I'll do so inside add message to DB and set image message. A new contact is added once you message a new person. Therefore, right inside add message to DB, I'll create a new method called addToContacts and pass sender ID and receiver ID as named arguments, as we don't want to mix them. After marking this function as async, I'll create a new variable of type timestamp, name it current time, and set it to timestamp.now. Then I'll write user collection.document sender ID .collection contacts collection .document receiver ID to get to the contacts collection of the sender, and specifically target the document with ID same as receiver's ID. And we'll be doing the same for receiver as well. To prevent redundancy, I'll create a function with return type document reference and name it getContactsDocument. Then I'll create 2 named parameters of type string. The first one will be called off, and the second one is going to be for contact. This function will return user collection.document of.collection contacts collection .document for contact. So far, we have not defined this contacts collection. So we'll go over to the strings file, copy this, and write contacts collection. Then replace the value with contacts. Alright, I'll come back to the previous file, and I'll create another method with return type future, void, and name it addToSendersContact. Then this will receive a sender ID, a receiver ID, and current time. We'll mark it as async, and right over here I'll write await getContactsDocument. I'll set off to sender ID and for contact to receiver ID. We have passed sender ID to the off named parameter as we are trying to look into a sender's contact collection. So now that we have the document reference, I can call the get method to get the document in the form of a document snapshot. Then I'll assign this to document snapshot sender snapshot. We need to check whether this document already exists. If it does, then it would mean that the person with whom the sender is communicating with is already a contact, and we don't need to do anything. But if it doesn't, then it means that this is a new person. So I'll write if sendersDocument.exists and then put the not operator at the beginning to check for the complement. So if the senders document does not exist, then I'll create a contact object called receiver contact and initialize it. For UID, I'll pass receiver ID, and for added on, I'll pass the current time. Then we're going to map it to a map variable by calling the toMap function. And then we'll set the result to receiver map. Finally, we are ready to put this data in the Firestore database. So I'll write get contacts document, pass the same set of arguments as we did before, then call the setData method and pass the receiver map as an argument. Great. So now when a sender sends a message, the receiver of that message will be added as a contact in the sender's contacts list. Let's do the same for the receiver. I'll basically copy this method, then rename it to add to receiver's contacts, replace sender's document with receiver's document. Now for the auth parameter, I'll pass receiver ID and I'll set for contact to sender ID. Then we'll check if the receiver's document does not exist. And I'll rename this to sender contact. And don't forget to change these values, because this time we'll need to pass the sender ID. After that, we'll rename the map variable and set it to sender contact .toMap sender contact. And now we want to look into the receiver document for contact, sender ID, and set sender map. Let's call both of these methods inside add to contacts. I'll await for both of them one after the other. I would also like to define two more methods. Basically, they are just going to be streams which we'll be utilizing when we define stream builder. First, I'll write stream of type query snapshot and name it fetch contacts. As you can guess, it is responsible for fetching a user's contacts. So this takes a string user ID and returns with user collection dot document user ID dot collection contacts collection dot snapshots. So we are basically querying all the documents which are present inside the contacts collection of a specific user. And just below this, I'll create another stream and name it fetch last message between, which is going to be responsible for fetching the very last message between two users. And I'll pass string sender ID, then string receiver ID. And I'll mark both of these as required. Then this method would return messages collection dot document sender ID dot collection receiver ID dot order by timestamp dot snapshots. So we are basically retrieving all the messages between a sender ID and the receiver ID, and we'll map it into a list and display the very last message. Let's go back to the chat list screen, and I'll wrap the list view.builder returned by chat list container with a stream builder of type query snapshot. And at the very top of this widget, I'll write final chat methods equal chat methods. I would also like to create an instance of user provider inside the build widget, just like that. Now for the stream, I'll write chat methods dot fetch contacts and retrieve the user ID from user provider to pass it further as an argument. Then the builder returns with a context and a snapshot. I'll check whether the snapshot has data. If it does, then we'll retrieve a list of documents by writing snapshot.data.documents and set it to doc list. Like I said, this list of documents represents the contact list of the currently logged in user. Then again, we'll check whether the doc list is empty or not. If it is, then we'll return a widget called quiet box, or else I'll return listview.builder. Make sure to change this item count from 2 to doclist.length. And for item builder, I'll write contact equal contact.fromMap and pass doclist index.data. Finally, I'll return contact view. The builder still shows a blue line, which means that we still need to pass one more widget in case the snapshot does not has any data. Well, in that case, we'll simply return center, child, circular progress indicator. The only thing that's left is to define the quiet box. So I'll come over to the widgets folder, create a new file called quietbox.dart. Now quietbox is going to be a stateless widget and it will return a center, padding, then I'll set its padding to edgeinsets.symmetric horizontal 25. Then I'll set child to container, set the color to universal variables.separator color, set padding to edgeinsets.symmetric vertically 35, horizontally 25. Then for child, I'll simply write column, set the main axis alignment to main axis alignment.min, cross axis alignment to cross axis alignment.center. And for children, the first one is going to be a text where I'll write this is where all the contacts are listed. Now this will be sort of like a heading. So I'll set its style, text style, set the font weight to font weight.bold and font size to 30. I'll also set the text line to textline.center. Then I'll introduce a sized box of height 25 to get some spacing. Then I'll write text. Now this will be a sort of subtitle or description. So I'll set its style to text style, letter spacing to 1.2, font weight to font weight.normal, and font size to 18. I'll set text line to textline.center for this text widget as well. Then again, I'll write size box of height 25, and finally, I'll give an option for your user to be able to search for someone directly by clicking a button. So I'll write flat button, give it a color, set its color to universal variables dot light blue color, child to text, start searching, and for the onPressed, I'll write navigator.push context, then pass a material page route, then builder, context, and finally return search screen. To be honest, this is a very lousy way of navigating in your app. You could either use named arguments or you could create a simple function that prevents you from writing all that much code, and you can just provide it with a widget that you want to navigate to. We still need to do one more thing in the chat list screen, which is to pass the contact object as an argument to contact view widget. Now, I'll come over to contact view, make a variable of type contact, and name it contact. Then I'll initialize it inside the class constructor. It would be better if I just take this complete custom tile widget out of here. So I'll just cut the complete widget from here. Then I'll create another stateless widget called view layout, come inside the build method, and paste everything right over here. At the top, I'll create an instance of user class, name it contact, and an object of class chat methods. Don't forget to initialize the contact variable. Coming back to the build method of contact view, I'll return a future builder of type user. Then at the top, I'll write final auth methods equal auth methods. Now we need a way to get the complete user details of any user just by their user ID. So far, we have not defined such a method. Therefore, I'll go over to auth methods, and here you can see that we already have a method which says get user details. But this only gets the user details of currently logged in user. Either you could modify this or just create a new function. In my case, I'll just create a new function of type future of type user. I'll name it get user details by ID, and it takes ID as an argument. Then I'll mark it as async, and I'll start off by declaring a variable of type document snapshot. After that, I'll write user collection.document, and for the document ID, I'll pass the user ID that we'll receive as an argument. Finally, I'll just call the .get method on that document. Of course, you would have to await for this result in order for it to return a document snapshot. After that, I'll return a user.fromMap and pass document snapshot.data as an argument. We should also wrap this with a try-catch block, catch an error, print that error, and return null. Go back to contact view, and now for the future, I can write auth methods.getUserDetails by ID and pass contact.uid. Then the builder returns with a context and a snapshot. We check whether the snapshot has data. If it does, then we'll simply write user equals snapshot.data. Since the future that we are waiting for directly returns a user instead of a map, therefore we didn't have to use user.fromMap named constructor. Finally, I'll return view layout and pass the user as a contact. Whereas if the snapshot is null, which it usually is when the request is being made and the response is awaited, in that case we'll return center, child, circular progress indicator. Now let's come over to view layout, and right inside the build method, I would start by creating a user provider, and initialize it by writing provider.auth context and specify the type. Come over to title and text, then delete whatever is already there and write contact $.name ? The question mark dot is known as conditional member access operator, and writing something like contact $.name is same as writing if contact is not null, then return contact.name else return null. Then the second operator that we are using, which is question mark, is known as if null operator. So if you write contact.name ? Then this is same as writing if contact.name is not equal null, then return contact.name or else return the string. Here we are combining both of those operators to check that neither the contact object is null nor the contact.name value is null. But if they are, then we can simply return the string. To be honest, you don't really have to do this here. You can just write contact.name as we already know that the contact will not be null. I just did it to demonstrate the usage of these two very important operators. Now for the leading, I'll remove the circle avatar widget, replace it with cached image, pass contact.profilePhoto as an argument, set the radius to 80, and isRound to true. Finally, let's go over to the onTap callback, and I'll write navigator.push, context, material page route, builder, context, and return chat screen. Then for the receiver, we'll simply pass contact. Let's test everything that we have done so far. I've launched the app in 2 devices, and there are no contacts at the moment. Therefore, I get to see this quiet box. I'll tap on the search button, then search for my other account, and send hi. There we go. Now I'm able to see the person who sent me the message. And I can simply tap and start chatting. Great! Just 2 more things to go. A widget that shows the last message and another widget to keep track of a user's state. So I can start by targeting the subtitle property of custom tile and pass last message container widget. Then just over here, I'll create a new file called lastMessageContainer.dart. I'll start by making a stateless widget and name it last message container. We'll be making use of a stream builder widget to update the last message in real time. And just to keep this widget reusable, I'll write final stream, initialize the stream variable in the constructor, and mark it as required. Then I'll come over to build method, return stream builder, and set the stream to stream. Then the builder will return with a context async snapshot of type query snapshot. Then we'll check whether the snapshot has data. If it does, then I'll declare another variable called docList and set it to snapshot.data.documents. If you hover over documents, you'll get to see that it is just a list of document snapshots. Then we'll check whether the list of document is not empty. If it is not empty, then we'll map out a message object. So I'll write message equal message.fromMap. Now we only want to map the very last message present inside the document list. So I'll write docList.last.data. Finally, I'll return with sized box, set its width to mediaQuery.off, context.size.width multiplied by 0.6. This is done so as to only show the very first line of the last message. So if someone sends a very large paragraph, even then the last message container will only show the very first line of the whole paragraph. After that, I'll write child, text, and pass message.message. Set max lines to 1 and overflow to textoverflow.ellipsis. Then I'll set style to text style, color to colors.gray, and font size to 14. Now if the docList is empty, then we'll want to return with a text that says no message and set the style to same as before. And in the case when the snapshot does not returns with the data, we'll simply return text, a double dot string, and set the style same as before. Now I'll go back to contact view. Here we need to specify a stream for the last message container. So I'll simply write stream chat methods dot fetch last message between, and for the sender ID I'll pass the current user's ID using the user provider, and for the receiver ID we'll simply pass contact.uid. And that's all we need to do to get the last message between 2 users. Last but not the least, in fact this is probably the most interesting thing that we're going to do today, making a user state indicator. And this state indicator would tell us whether the contact is online or offline. To everyone who is new to this channel, if you enjoyed the video so far, then please consider subscribing to contribute to the growth of this channel. I'm going to start off by making an enum. Therefore, I'll create a new file inside the enum folder and name it user_state.dart. Then I'll write enum user state, and any user can be either in the offline state, which means that they have completely removed the app from background, or online state, which means that they're interacting with the app, or the waiting state, which means that they are around but they are just not interacting at the moment. This enum is only created so as to make the code more readable. Firebase does not know how to handle a user-defined data type, such as user state. Therefore, we'll need a way to convert this user state into a more primitive data type, such as an integer. So I'll just go over to the utils file and I'll create 2 static methods. For the first one, I'll write static int state to num, and this expects a user state value to be passed as an argument. And all this function does is it accepts the user state and returns a corresponding integer. So I'll write switch user state. So in the first case, when the user state is offline, we'll return 0. When user state is online, we'll return 1. And in the default case, I'll return 2. Similarly, just below this method, I'll create another method by writing static user state num2 state. And this num2 state expects an integer value to be passed as an argument so that it can return a corresponding state. So I'll again write switch number, and in case the number is equal to 0, we'll return user state dot offline. When the number is 1, we'll return user state dot online, and for the default case, we'll return user state dot waiting. Now we need a way to access the user collection and update the user state value of a user. And since we are going to be updating a value inside user collection, therefore we need to make the corresponding method inside auth methods file. First, I'll create a function of void return type and name it set user state. And it takes 2 parameters, named string user ID and user state user state. Then I'll create an int variable called statenum, which stores the results returned by utils.state2num and pass the user state. As you already know, if the user state happens to be offline, then it will return 0. If it is online, then it will return 1, or else it will return 2. Finally, I'll write user collection.document user ID, and I'll call the update data method. Then I'll specify the field that we want to update, which is state, and set it to statenum. We also need a way to fetch this state value, and this needs to be fetched in real time. So I'll just create a method with return type stream of type document snapshot and name it getUserStream, which takes a UID as an argument and returns userCollection.document. Then I'll pass the UID and call the snapshots method. It's finally time for us to create a variable which makes use of this stream. Therefore, I'll just create a new file inside widgets folder and name it online.indicator. This is going to be a stateless widget, and it takes a string UID as a named argument. I'll also make an object of auth methods class. For the UI of this widget, I'll start by writing align and set its alignment to bottom right, since this widget is going to be present inside of a stack. Then for the child, I'll pass stream builder of type document snapshot, and for stream, I'll pass auth methods .getUserStream, and we need to pass the UID as an argument. After that, builder returns with a context and a snapshot. Since we are listening to a user document, therefore we can map a user out of it. So I'll just create a new user class instance. Then I'll check if snapshot has data, and snapshot.data.data is not equal null. In that case, we'll set the user to user.fromMap and pass snapshot.data.data as an argument. Finally, I'll return a container, set its height to 10, width to 10, margin to 8 from the right and 8 from the top. Then I'll set the decoration to box decoration, shape to box shape.circle, and color to get color. Then I'll pass user ?state. According to this argument, if the user is null, then we'll be just passing a null value. Let's define the getColor method. It expects an integer to be passed as an argument. Then I'll write switch utils.num2state and pass the int value here to return the corresponding user state. Then we'll check for the various cases. So in case the user state is offline, we'll return colors.red, whereas if the user state is online, then we would want to return green color, and in the default case, we will simply return the orange color. You might wonder what would be the color of this indicator for the minute time when the snapshot does not have any data. Well, in that case, user variable will remain null. Therefore, this whole argument will be null. And when a null argument is passed to num2state method, it automatically goes to the default case and returns userState.waiting, which in turn would cause this switch block to go to its default case and ultimately return the orange color. Let's place this widget where it belongs. I'll go over to contact view, remove everything after cached image, and write online.indicator. Then for the UID, we'll pass contact.uid. Great! Now, we need a way to make changes in the database based on a user's activity on the app. Therefore, I'll go over to the home screen, and right over here, I'll write with widgets binding observer. This class is basically used to keep a track of the app lifecycle. We're going to start off by accessing the instance of widgets binding class and add an observer, like so. We'd also want to remove that observer, and I'll do so by overriding the dispose method, and remove the observer when home screen is disposed. In order to keep track of the lifecycle, widgets binding provides us with a method to override. The name of the method is didChangeAppLifeCycleState, which provides us with AppLifeCycleState state. I'll create and store the current user ID with the help of the user provider. Don't forget to call this super.didChangeAppLifeCycleState state method. Finally, we can make use of a switch block to detect various lifecycle events, such as AppLifeCycle.paused, resumed, inactive, and detached. An app is considered to be in pause state when the user is not actively interacting with it, but it is still present somewhere in the background. In this case, I'll first check if the current user ID is not equal null. If it's not, then I'll call auth methods .setUserState and pass current user ID, userState.waiting as arguments to set the user state of current user to waiting. Or else, I'll simply print paused state. Don't forget to add the break keyword. Then for the appCycle.resumed, I'll basically copy and paste everything over here, and this time we would want to set the user state to userState.online. And if the current user ID is null, then I'll simply print resumed state. Then, in case the app is in inactive mode, which simply means that the app is completely removed from the backstack, in that case we'll want to set the user state to offline and print something like inactive. Then there's one more lifecycle event which is called AppLifeCycleState.detached. In this case as well, we'll simply want to set the user state to offline and print detached. Now when the user first launches the application, we'll want to set their user state to online. Therefore, I'll go inside of the add_postFrame callback, and just below refresh user, I'll start writing auth methods .setUserState, pass the current user's ID, and set the user state to userState.online. Awesome, we have completed one more complicated task. Let's go for our final test. I have launched the app in 2 different devices. Now, as I message the user on the other device, he is added as a contact in my contact list, and I'm added as a contact in his contact list. And the cool thing about this is, suppose if I or the user updates their name to something else, then it would be reflected in the chat list as well. This is why we didn't maintain a specific contact name inside the contact collection, because it would be particularly difficult to update. So if I send a message, there we go, the last message changes to whatever the last message was sent. And if I send an image, then the last message changes to image. Alright, let's test this online dot indicator. So if I put the app in the background, the online indicator changes to orange, and when I resume, it changes back to green. Finally, if I just completely close the app, it changes to red, depicting that the user is now offline or unreachable. I hope you learned lots of cool and new things which you can implement on your own projects. This whole course should be finished in just 2 or 3 more videos, unless I decide to add more features like group chat and so on. After this, I'm also planning to make a course on building a social networking app in Flutter using just a library I sort of discovered. That's right, using a library. Although nothing is final as of now, but once it does get final, I'll definitely let everyone know about it. In the next one, we'll make a profile for our users and give them an option to log out of the app. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section. And to everyone who are new, please consider subscribing to the channel in order to get awesome content on Flutter delivered right in your YouTube feed. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.